I'm Mike Hoffman,
Hello.
editor-in-chief of Inc. And I'm really excited for this next conversation. Excited to welcome to Founders House Mikey Mohr and Seth Rogen, the co-founders of Houseplant. So please give them a big round of applause. So Houseplant is sort of a lifestyle design company. You guys just launched a beverage, recently. You had your sort of first big event yesterday, I think, here in Austin, which is great. Tell us about the genesis of Houseplant as a company. How did you guys come together as co-founders, and what's the idea behind the company?
Hi, everybody. Now, there you go. Thank you.
That one works.
I want to just start by saying I'm terrified at how close to the ledge this stool is. This is very precarious. But it'd be great press if I broke my neck during this Q&A.
It would be terrible press.
Yes.
That would be terrible press.
It would go viral. I could swear you. Hey, we got another one. What was the genesis of Houseplant? I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia. Me and my dear friend Evan Goldberg, who is actually Mikey's cousin, and Mikey, we've known each other since we were kids. We grew up smoking a lot of weed, I became sort of a recognizable person starting in my early 20s, and I would do interviews, and people would ask what I like, and I would talk about how I liked weed. And then a few years after that, we made a movie called Pineapple Express, which was really, made by people who love weed for people who love weed. But it really was like one of the first, I'd say, like weed movies that was like a real movie, like that had kind of all the care and attention and like passion put into it that like people associate with non-weed movies. And we saw that it really resonated with people, and that it really spoke to our sensibilities and our passions, and that it like really landed with people. And it was very like cathartic for people in some ways if they loved weed, because it was the first time they were being presented with something that kind of made them feel okay in a film, you know what I mean? And I think the subtext was like, these guys were probably high when they made this movie, and look, they made a whole movie. Like, yes, we were. In the meantime, it all started in Canada. Canada, actually, we live in LA. I lived a few blocks from one of the first, like, I guess, quote unquote, legal weed stores. And so I would go to it all the time, and I would see this kind of like new industry forming, like literally like before my eyes. And I was like, this seems like a really fun thing to get into. And I feel like I could really communicate with the people who love this. And I am myself someone who loves it. And I was also very, the legality of it at the time in the States was dubious, I guess, or confusing. But meanwhile, Canada was federally legalizing weed. And so that became a good place for us to start. And in the meantime, I was doing pottery with my wife Lauren, and I collected vintage ashtrays, and I got really into like home design. And as someone who smoked weed, I found that there wasn't a lot of like things for me specifically in my home. Ashtrays, lighters, things like that. I was making my own things or getting vintage things. And so all these things kind of converged at once, and we created Houseplant, which was kind of, an expression of our love of weed and our love of the lifestyle and wanting to make things that we ourselves would be excited to purchase and own. And in Canada, we were selling weed and we were selling beverages. And in America, for the last while, we've only we sold weed and we've been selling home goods, but now beverages is something that we are launching. And in Canada was hugely successful and something that we were always really excited about. And it always felt like a very intuitive way to ingest things that make you feel differently. That's been grandfathered in, I think,
Your background is on Wall Street, but then you sort of got into things like boutique hotels, and that's how you sort of became part of the lifestyle brand that is Houseplant. Can you talk about your background and then how this got off the ground?
Sure. This working? Yep. My background was working on Wall Street and ran a real estate fund for a decade. We focused on hospitality a lot, owning, operating boutique hotels, and that's where I learned a lot about, operating all these little businesses that each had a different personality and thinking about the customer journey everywhere from the digital all the way through the on-site experience. And I was doing that in parallel to these guys building their career in Hollywood. And so again, it was just the confluence of a few things landing at the right time. These guys, knocking Pineapple Express out of the park, and Seth getting into the ceramics, and us, collectively recognizing that there was going to be a massive opportunity within the THC category, and that through the work that these guys had done, we were really well positioned to participate in that. And then it's been really easy since then. No. And we recognize so we started talking about how we could pursue this category, and we recognized that it was really early innings, and this is going back probably 12 years ago. And so we decided that we would be students for a while, and we took every meeting that we possibly could with anyone doing anything related to THC. It was some of the weirdest, wildest meetings that we've ever had.
What was the weirdest?
There was a lot of we'd ask a question of so how does this part of your business work? And they would draw the blinds and be like, okay,
We left one meeting, and I looked at Seth. I said, I think those guys thought we were wearing a wire.
Yeah, there's a few of those. Yeah, I know. I was like, why was that meeting in a sauna? Yeah.
And so that was really formative for us in recognizing that, hey, we have a lot to gain here, but we also have a lot to lose, and we don't want to.
And Tommy Chong had recently been sent to prison for selling bongs, essentially, and so I was very afraid I would be made an example of. You know what I mean? And
you guys could be prison roommates.
Exactly. That's the last thing I want. Yeah, I don't want.
We travel well together, but
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, we each would like our own room at least. Yeah.
Wait, so Seth, you said that when you were first getting interested in the idea of this industry, it was a legally dubious seeming space. Is it less legally dubious now?
Yes, since we made our company, we have been, I would say, very conservative, legally speaking, and have not even remotely done anything ourselves that could be confused with illegality. And yes, I probably wouldn't be here if talking like this if I was. We'd all be in a sauna together. But for us, timing, not barging in, but waiting to see how the dust has settled and coming in and doing something that is superior and more thought out rather than being first was always very important to us.
And we recognize that we are in an incredibly privileged position to be able to approach it that way, and that's the reality that we've hit head on from day one. And but with that patience that we have been afforded, we have really taken our time. We do not need to be first. We are going to get it right. And that we've said no a million times over the years, and have really carefully planned out a strategy to be on the right side of everything, and think about where we are at each point in time in the context of THC as it moves from stigmatized to socially acceptable to where I think we're on our way to, which is socially expected, right?
And so you said that ceramics and the sort of house goods and the home decor was sort of a way in or an entry point to build the business. Can you talk about how that came about, and what does that business look like today?
Yeah, I mean, it is, to what Mikey's saying, it was all about destigmatization. I came from a time when you hid your weed under the coffee table in a shoebox, and you ashed in a tuna can and then threw it away. But meanwhile, people had bars with beautiful martini sets, and it was all displayed and a prominent feature in the home. And I always thought well, it should both be like that. How come alcohol gets that treatment, but weed gets treated like shit, And so that was, to me, a really important part of it, is making products that revolved around weed consumption that you were actually proud to display, and that were a part of your home as opposed to something you were concealing within it. And so that's always how I approached it, and I always thought that was a big step towards normalizing it and destigmatizing it. And so yeah, that was really where it started. Was what if we made things that you were proud to show off, and that were reflective of your personality and your tastes and your sensibilities and the way that people like to decorate their homes. You know what I mean? And so, like that was always something that we thought would be really helpful for the whole space. You know.
And then for us, that it not only acted as a hedge against the THC side of the business, but what it really did was act as a Trojan horse for us to go and have legal compliant products that we could market and sell to customers across the nation and around the world, and allowed us to go and do partnerships with Airbnb and to work with major retailers like Kith and stay outside of the kind of smoke shop, head shop dispensary channel, but go and build a brand that was born out of cannabis lifestyle and was really offering something that community valued, all the while building this massive customer base for us, knowing that at some point we would be able to operate with THC products at scale, and that's kind of where we're at today.
You guys had sort of an interesting bifurcated social media strategy, right? Where you were sort of thinking about the home decor part of the business and then the THC part of the business. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, in a perfect world, it all lives together, right? And we have a flagship store in Los Angeles called Houseplant, and it's house and plant, and we're selling weed and we're selling homewares, but that's just not the reality, right? And so that's a lot of my role is managing risk and figuring out how we can do it all, right, at the same time. And so that's just one example, and there are many, right? They're different entities. We bank with different banks. We have different social media handles and websites, and that's just all properly navigating the rules on the field today.
And so is this like the first California sober brand? Is that like a way to think about it?
I mean, we have nothing against alcohol, and you can mix our drinks with alcohol for all I care, So like, I don't think
It'll be at the bar later.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang out, guys. Hang out.
So I don't think that's like, I don't know if overall sobriety is something that we are championing in any way, shape, or form. But I think that, it's just more speaking to like our personal passions and our personal tastes, So, and ironically, California is one of the states we actually cannot sell our beverage.
Tell me about that.
Delta 9 THC is not legal in California. A lot of the states where cannabis is legal, they've outlawed Delta 9 THC and vice versa for very confusing reasons.
Yeah. So talk about the beverage and how did that come about? And not that many home goods companies launch a beverage, so it's like an interesting, unique thing.
Yeah, I mean, we always looked and said, hey, if Yamaha can sell keyboards and motorbikes, we could figure this out, right?
We can do this.
So
I'm going to use that. That's a good one.
We were one of the first companies to ever launch a low-dose THC beverage, and that there may be people in the crowd that still don't recognize that you can drink THC. Like it is a brand new category, and to think that we launched our first beverage in Canada 5 years ago. Okay, so as a company, as an operating team, we're one of the only groups that actually has experience launching and scaling a THC beverage. We scaled it across Canada. We had a lot of friction with our partner at the time about what the right version of a THC drink should be.
What was that friction over? Was it taste? Was it the dosage?
Everything.
Yeah.
I bet
we had a very clear vision. Basically, like all day I drink like flavored sparkling water in different forms and brands. And it was simple. We were like, we just need to make something with 0 calories, 0 sugar, carbonated, tastes good, and has a low dose of THC in it, so you can drink several of them throughout your day or evening, as one is conditioned to do with like alcoholic drinks. Like you don't want to go to a party and open like a little atomic vial and slam it down and be high for 40 hours. Like that to us was not a pleasurable experience. And the idea of being able to socialize and talk and drink and have a few, that to us was like, it was just very clear and intuitive way that we would want to consume this type of thing.
But even today, that's counter. Like if you look at the data about what SKUs are moving at the highest velocity today, it is not low-dose THC beverages. It's still 10 milligrams is probably the fastest moving. Now, we're not playing in that space right now, even though a lot of our community is saying, hey, I'd like something stronger. That's not the place for us to be right now. Again, we have a long-term view on this. Last thing we want to do is have someone have a can of Houseplant and have a bad experience and get turned off the category completely.
Yeah, that's something I've have so much experience with is is me getting people too high. And I smoke. I'll be out socially smoking weed, and people will be like, want to smoke weed with me, and truthfully, like, one hit of very strong weed is too much for a lot of people, and especially if you don't smoke a lot of weed. And for edibles, a lot of people have had very bad experiences with edibles, myself included, where they're just too strong and they're unpredictable, and you don't know how long they're going to last and how fast it'll take for them to kick in. And so this, again, was like solving a very specific problem that I was seeing. Is like people want to ingest some sort of THC. They don't have a ton of experience with it always, and they're afraid they're going to have a bad experience. And so to make something that we knew for sure, like, you cannot have a bad experience having one of them, and you will see how you feel, and if you want to have more, you can go from there. And to us, that was also very important, because we didn't want to freak people out,
And so you had a tasting in store last night. Was that your first one? Is that right?
Technically, we did not have a tasting. We had a meet and greet, and
Sure, got it.
and no, but that we've been very deliberate and purposeful about what we're doing at what point in time. And we launched a beverage 5 years ago. We just launched in December in the U.S. And that was
do it over the beat. Do it over the beat. Rhyme the rest of the answer.
We were very patient and waiting. We knew we had a winning product in what we believe is a winning format in beverage, right? But we needed to wait for a few other things to happen until we could execute our strategy. As soon as we launch and start talking about these products, everyone's going to want them, right? So we needed to wait until we could build a supply chain that had sophisticated parties operating it with redundancy, right? We were ready to launch these years ago in California, but I built the supply chain, and I looked at it, and I said, man, any one of these guys I could call tomorrow, and they may not be here, right? So we have to wait until we could build a supply chain that we could rely upon, and that has good manufacturing processes, good testing protocols, so that we can offer a consistent, dosed experience every single time. Even with gummies today, that's not the case, and a lot of consumers don't recognize that they need to think about, hey, who's making this thing? Where am I buying it? Where am I, right? So another thing that we saw as a big milestone for, tipping point for us entering the category now was the change in point of sale. Because it's Delta-9 THC that's derived from hemp and not through marijuana, you have massive sophisticated retailers like Total Wine who have leaned into the category in a big way. So, when I saw that happen, I flew to Bethesda, I met with them, I told them who we are, what our experience was. We heard from them about how they're viewing the category, and I said, okay, this makes sense. Now we can do it. We launched online direct-to-consumer in December, and we launched with Total Wine in 3 markets, one of them being Texas. We're already, a couple months in, and we're in 11 states with them. But we did a meet and greet at the Total Wine in Sunset Valley here. Ironically, they gave me the numbers, and they said they moved 420 units that day.
Very nice. Yeah, you sent 420, right? No, yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. So where do you go next? You say you're in 11 states. You're not as active in Canada anymore. Is that right?
No, we left the Canadian market as it was, crumbling, and the and it didn't play out the way that a lot of the world thought that it would, honestly. And
what happened? What went wrong?
Well, many things, just as there have gone wrong and continue to go wrong in the U.S. with regulated marijuana, right? You can't apply logic to a lot of the things that are happening or should be happening, right? But you had a lot of Canadian companies that through the difference in legality between Canada and the U.S., they were Canadian domiciled companies that were publicly traded on the U.S. exchanges, so they had access to U.S. public markets, the massive capital, so they were able to grow up in Canada, build massive infrastructure, which and everyone thought that they had the winning pitch. So just massive overbuild of infrastructure, massive oversupply of product, and then those companies could not enter the U.S. as fast as they thought they would be able to. And so it was just a paradigm shift. And so we parted ways with our Canadian partner, and we launched on our own down here in March 2021.
If one thing could happen on the legal landscape to support the industry, what would that be? What would you ask for?
I mean, we always say, like, as long as it's harder to buy weed than alcohol, it should be the same. You know what I mean? Like, you should be able to buy weed in every type of situation you could buy alcohol. You should be able to buy it at restaurants. You should be able to buy it at stadiums. You should be able to buy it at bars. Like, and to us, that is like the thing we're always looking at, and the logical thing and the sensical thing, and it is getting closer to that. The fact that we're in a big liquor store and they're selling cans of weed is amazing, you know, and
Selling, not tasting, not tasting.
But yeah, I think like that those hurdles I think are still very real, and that's always what we think is like the equitable way to sell this type of product. Yeah.
So, Seth, you also are, you have the studio coming out on Apple Plus, and that's sort of a series, as I understand it, about sort of the conflict between, you know, art and commerce. And I'm sort of curious, in this moment in Hollywood, you know, there's a lot of disruption and a lot of change, and I think you see like a lot of creators and a lot of actors and other folks leaning into entrepreneurial ventures as well. I'm sort of curious, A, can you tell us a little bit about the studio, and then B, you know, what sort of drives you to work with Houseplant and to sort of have this entrepreneurial life apart from your very successful acting career?
Yeah, the studio comes out in a few weeks. Apple TV Plus. I play the head of a movie studio. We premiered it here a couple nights ago, and it went very well. I'm very happy about it.
It's being called the first must-watch show of 2025, right? That's pretty good.
Yeah, Catherine O'Hara's on it, and Bryan Cranston, and a lot of Catherine Hahn, many famous people as themselves as well. I mean, I don't view this as like an entrepreneurial endeavor, if I'm being very honest. I view it exactly like any movie I were to make or any TV show I were to make. Like, for me, this is a creative endeavor. This is a thing I have in my head that I'm trying to bring to life because it represents my passion and my sensibility, and I'm hoping it connects with people in that exact same way. And that's exactly what I think when I'm writing a TV show or a film. It is my desire to manifest in a real world this thing I have in my head that I think I would love if someone else did it. And if someone else presented that to me, I would be a ravenous consumer of it, you know?
Ravenous.
Yes. A ravenous meet and greeter of it, not consumer. So yeah, I mean, I do know many entrepreneurial people. You won't see me owning like a cell phone company anytime soon. I don't think. I'd probably be much richer if I did, but that is not how I want to personally spend my time and energy. Like, to me, what I love about this is it allows me to have another creative outlet and another way to connect with people that have the same sensibilities as me in a lot of ways, you know? And so that's how I view it, truthfully, yeah.
You sort of both talked about like the importance of the consumer and being close to the consumer and being the consumer in some cases. And I'm sort of curious, was there a moment in this sort of journey of Houseplant where you thought like, oh, we are finding our audience. We have reached the people like us that we want to reach, and they are really responding to this brand?
I would say that we knew we had the audience, and it became clear as soon as we launched in the U.S. and launched our homewares for the first time. And you know, we didn't know, you know, no one's made a table lighter or a standing ashtray in decades, and we're like, how many of these should we make? I don't know. We make them, we present them to the world, and they were just swept right up. And so I guess that was the first kind of validating moment. We said, okay, we knew we liked these things, and we would love to buy them if we saw them, and that was the validation. Okay, there is this community out there, and they want these things too. And so if we keep making, you know, keep that ravenous barometer.
For me, I mean, I see it when I'm out in the world. I'd say like half of the people who come up to me tell me they love Houseplant, and like, and not again, it probably speaks to the contracting entertainment industry as well. But like, just so many people come to me on the street and they're like, I have one of your ashtrays. I love it. Every time I use it, it makes me so happy. And so to me, that was like a real shift I saw, is just like the fans that were approaching me were not necessarily fans of my movies. They were fans of my ashtrays, which was great. I was thrilled about it. Yeah.
They probably use them more frequently, right? So if you, thinking about like Houseplant, a year from now, what if you could solve one problem within the business or change one thing about the business, what would that be, and what would you like to see a year from now?
I mean, it's always going to be federal legalization of marijuana, right? I mean, that's, as Seth was saying previously, that it should be treated equally. That's not going to happen in a year. But that if we could change one thing, again, we set ourselves up to be able to exist and hopefully thrive in any landscape. But that would be the one thing that I think would benefit the most people possible, not just us.
And as you think about like this brand, is there something that you've learned about brand building as part of this exercise that you didn't know before, that you think like all the founders in the audience could benefit from knowing?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think for us, we've found that the more personal it is, the more you actually connect to it, the more you can speak to it as the person who would want it. I think that's been very helpful to us, and I think our ability to really kind of have ownership over what we do stems from the fact that like we are so passionate about it, and we are the consumers of it, And I think I meet a lot of people who work in finance, and they just want to be a part of something. You know what I mean? I just want to build something. I just want to get in on the ground floor of something. But to me, that is like a very vague goal, and probably not one that will lead you to something you're very passionate about. So I think that's just something I've personally seen from people I've met throughout the years, is if it's something that you actually love, it all of a sudden becomes worth so much more work, and the hardships, and even if it goes terribly, you at least took a risk doing something you love, and you didn't take a risk doing something that like you thought might work. And I think those are two very different things. And I would never like participate in a thing that I personally didn't connect to, but I thought might work. And I think that we had every reason to think this would never work, honestly. Again, like, there hasn't been like a company selling drinks and ashtrays probably ever. And so
there's always got to be a first one, right?
Exactly. And so it's only because we love it that we do it,
And how big do you think this can be?
Huge.
As big as every drink that's on the in the back of the bar there, and bigger. I mean, the number of people that already, in the face of current legal landscape, continue to choose THC as their preferred option is I think shows us how large of an opportunity this is.
Well, terrific. So I've got to get these guys on their way to their next event. But Mikey Mohr, Seth Rogen of Houseplant, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Founders House.